So, this is the first tutorial from Dark Fantastic Mills on how we paint our scenery, and today we're going to look at the Fallen Empire Archway. We'll start with a quick rundown of all the materials we use. Here is the black gesso we use for all our undercoating. It's a very matte black paint and it dries very smoothly, especially formulated to do so, I believe. And then we use a warm grey from De La Rowney, their System 3 range. It's pretty cheap and is a really nice colour for really all scenery purposes. Makes it a little bit white, that could be anything really. Then the main tools we use, the sponge is just cheap dishwashing sponge, you can get them anywhere, and you cut them to the sizes you want. And then we use a larger poured sponge, the kind of thing you get to wash a car or something, and we tear those up and use them for doing the final texture layer. So, obviously, you probably spray your models. It's a lot faster than what we're doing here. But I would recommend this approach if you're painting a lot of scenery. It's obviously a bit cheaper than buying lots of spray cans. It's a bit greener. But this paint also does a really good job of smoothing off the model. And I really recommend undercoating your model first before you do any of the sanding or cleaning up, particularly if you've bought one of our models. The reason for this is that a 3D print often is quite shiny and picks up the light and can often look like it needs more work than it actually does. So by undercoating it first, letting it dry, and then really seeing how it looks, you can probably save yourself a lot of work. For the purposes of this tutorial, this model hasn't been cleaned up at all, and actually 95% of the models that we paint and all the models that you see on the website haven't been cleaned. They haven't been sanded or filled, they've just been painted. This technique is really quite good at making 3D prints look really nice actually on the table, and so it does save you all that additional work prepping it. But of course, if you want to do that and sand it off, make it all lovely and smooth, then go for it, because why not? But once you get to this stage and once the model's dried, you'll really be able to see any lines or any bumps that you do want to address with maybe a little bit of sandpaper or a sharp knife at this stage. So for the painting, the main painting of the model, we're just going to get some of the warm grey, paint it onto our palette, take the sponge and just lightly dab it onto the sponge, get a reasonably covering, but you don't want too much. Grab your model and then just start dabbing at it. And this is really the whole of the technique really. You just want to dab it on there and just build it up bit by bit until you get the look that you're after. Obviously, there's a little bit of a knack to it. Once you've done it a few times and different materials you're trying to achieve, you'll have different approaches. But just, I'd recommend just getting stuck in there and experimenting, because, of course, the great thing with 3D prints and scenery is if you don't like the way it looks, you can just paint over it and maybe sand it down a bit and then do it again. And all you'll end up doing is making the model a bit smoother because you're filling it in with extra paint. And you can try things out. The models are very resilient and can put up with quite a lot of punishment in terms of sanding and scraping back. So yeah, just play around with it and try things out. It's pretty easy to get the hang of, I think. And as you can see, the look, it builds up really quickly, and yeah, looks pretty good. Once we've finished sponging on the warm grey base coat to all the different parts of the archway, we then mix a bit of white in with the warm grey. The ratio is, depends on what you want to do. Obviously, kind of 1-to-1 works quite well. If you want to take your time over it, you could do a lighter grey and then a much whiter highlight on top of that. But once you have the next stage mixed, just take the large sponge with the pores, dab it on, and again, you don't want too much paint on the sponge, but not too little either. Then we just dab that on, and we're trying to recreate that effect of a kind of speckled pattern like you get on rocks or, the tree bark, those kind of things there. You can see it there. And it's just very quick, very simple. You don't want to do too much of it. Very much less is more. Again, if you do too much, just repaint that section. It's perfectly okay. You could take it right back to black and then work it back up again if you want to. This has quite a nice effect. It does several things. You can catch the edges, so it gives you an edge highlight while you're doing it. And really, combined with the base coat, the sponged effect seems to act as a kind of camouflage, which makes the model look very smooth and hides really any sort of sign of the print lines, unless you're looking very close to it. So I mean, it's ideal for for the tabletop. Give you a nice finish. And again, ties all the models together. The fact that everything has a similar technique, just pulls it all together. So we're painting we painted the faces separately. They're going to go to the top. Obviously, if they were all glued on in the first place, that would be fine, but it's difficult to get into the sharp, deep recesses with the sponge. So if you can keep things separate, it works better. We'll glue those on at the next stage. You'll find that there are parts on the models which are hard to get to with the sponge, the deep cracks, in this case the inside of the archway. In those cases I just use a really rough old brush, it's kind of scumble brush, with a little bit of grey paint on it, and just dab and as I sort of scumble in grey into those areas until I'm happy with the range of contrast across the model. You can see we keep this in two parts. We've glued the faces and the floor into the top, but we'll keep them separately in two parts like this for ease of storage. And you never know, we might release a ruined tower top section at a later date. And here we have the finished towers, and this is the one we were painting in the tutorial.